Hello, people of the channel. I hope you're doing well. Hopefully.
Hello, people of the channel.
Oh.
I hope you're doing well. Hopefully. Hello, people of the channel. I hope you're doing well.
I need to mute my second screen. So what we had in some of the previous live Q&As that I've done is I wasn't able to follow the questions particularly well. Anyway, so I've now got you there. I have a screen there, which is running the whole thing. I've got questions up there, and I have another screen down here, which is hopefully going to mean that I can scroll back through some of the questions if I miss them. So I forgot to mute my laptop, and so that's why you probably hear you could hear me in stereo then. Anyway, that's all good news. I'm back from the pub, and the first thing you probably noticed is that I'm first of all not wearing what I was wearing in the thumbnail. That's a massive lie, and also my wine color has changed from the thumbnail. So already we are deceiving each other horribly. Anyway, I thought it would be a good idea to do a Q&A now. It's been quite a while since I've done a live one. There was a pre-recorded one that I did some weeks back, and you're probably not going to be that massively surprised to hear that occasionally I'll do a Q&A if I don't actually have an episode necessarily ready. I know that some channels do Q&As at big landmarks like, I don't know, 100,000 subscribers or 1 million subscribers or whatever, but we're not quite at that point yet. That said, the subscribership is going up quite considerably. We had definitely a lull period, but now I think particularly driven by some of the outdoor gear videos that I've been doing, we are now going up by the hundreds every day, which is rather nice. It's not quite the tens of thousands that we had joining per day right back when I trended on YouTube in the early days of early 2021, but the algorithm and the YouTube gods, we can never really predict what they're going to be up to. Anyway, so I'm going to answer as many questions as I possibly can. In fact, I think generally I answer questions pretty much continually until they run out, and I think generally we go for about an hour or so. If they do come in a constant stream, then there's a chance that I may have to stop it at some point, but we've not had that problem in the past. I think we've tended to have a natural end. All right, so the chat, I can see the chat, that's fine, that's all good. What I might do is start off with a question that's been sent in. These came in either from the comments below videos, they've come in via email, via Instagram DMs, so on and so on. So I've got a whole mix. And what I've done is I've sort of jumbled them up because I don't want to do a whole load of questions just about Bernard, just about the Arctic, just about sleeping bags, just about Alan, just about the way that my job works, all that sort of stuff. I thought I'd mix the whole lot up so we have a jumbled pack. The first question is, I actually can't remember where this came via, but it doesn't really matter. This came in and it says, do you have a job? And I suppose this is referencing the fact that I do often sort of vaguely talk about traveling a lot for work and having sometimes delays for videos because basically I need to do stuff. And the answer is I don't have a job as in a pay-as-you-earn salary job, no. I've not had a job of that type since I was 23 years old, and it'll shock you to hear that I'm no longer 23 years old. I did almost exactly 12 months of officers training in the British Royal Marines. So I think I did almost to the day exactly a year down at what's known as Commando Training Centre. That was the last time that I have had like a monthly pay packet deposited in my bank account. I left for a whole load of reasons, injury being one. Secondly, I started to question the direction that the Afghan war was going in, and that was very much one of the hottest periods at that time. And yeah, a whole load of reasons why I decided that ultimately I think a civilian life was going to suit me better, and essentially being my own boss. So the work that I do now all surrounds Arctic journeys. Everything sort of comes off as spokes from the hub of doing journeys in cold parts of the world, and that will include obviously now a lot of YouTube. That came naturally out of a bit of an idea I had during COVID lockdown. That's the only reason I have this YouTube channel. That was why Alan existed. The whole thing came out of the fact that my normal work had sort of stopped because of the border closures of COVID. And from that, obviously, you know about my books. I rabbit on and try and plug my books at every opportunity. So I write those. My bread and butter, I suppose, would be speaking. I'm asked to come and lecture and speak at lots of events for schools, universities, companies all over the world. I've been to Shanghai and the US, and yeah, that's really good fun. So that's often periods of the year when they tend to cluster around. Often September, October is very busy. I tend to sometimes be speaking 3 or 4 times a week, and that can limit obviously the opportunity for me to do the R&D work, the filming, editing, all that. And so I try and work around all that. So the answer is no, I don't have a job. I don't have a boss. My boss is me. But I've always had the attitude through life that I don't want to subscribe to a formal education, career ladder, graduate recruitment scheme, all that sort of stuff, retire, and then at some point expire. That's not how I really want to live. I decided a long time ago, despite the fact I went through a fairly traditional school and then university education, I saw my life as slightly different. Simply the fact that we are lucky enough to, through total accident and against all the odds, we are able, if we're lucky, to inhabit the planet that can support life, which is mad, for a few decades. If we're lucky, 7, 8, 9 decades. I simply see that time as time in which I want to experience things, get stuff done, and try and deliver a little bit of something original to the planet and what might be left behind after I do expire. That's simply how I structure my life and how I've seen my career build over the last sort of 15 years or so. So that hopefully is a reasonable answer to your question. I will now do one that's come in from why work 40 hours per week for someone else when you can work 90 hours for yourself? Yeah, that's not a question. That is a comment, and you're absolutely right. It is funny. I've got obviously lots of friends who are. I've got friends who are doctors, work in the city, all sorts of things. Obviously, friends who are still in the forces, and yes, I would say even those who are hospital doctors, I do work significantly longer hours. Now, first of all, caveats, that is by choice. Sometimes that work is simply reading, researching, going through ideas. And so the work tempo will vary. I tend to work quite late into the evenings if I'm not out and about seeing people and doing things. And generally in the evening, I will be doing more reading and research work. So yeah, I choose the particular times of day to suit what sort of mood I'm in. And generally after I've trained, I tend to train in the early evening. I tend to do sort of slightly easier work afterwards, sometimes just doing routine emails. So yeah, I completely agree that, well, the idea of a 40-hour week, I don't think I've ever done a 40-hour week. It's always been substantially more. What happened to the team in your last video about your first trip to Greenland? So I just posted a few days ago a real look back through the archives of some footage that was filmed by iFilm and TV, lovely group of guys, right back when I was literally just leaving university, and we were in southeast Greenland. It was the first time that I'd ever been to that part of the world. And we were planning at the time to do something called Journey South 2007. That somewhat dates it. And it was supposed to be a journey down in the Antarctic. Now, very long story short, this is actually all detailed in my book, The Long Haul. There's the plug out the way. We got kind of screwed over by one of the sponsors, and we basically didn't have the money in time, so we couldn't go. Then my team, all being quite a bit older than me, I was in my early 20s. They were, the team were either in their 20s, someone, Rich was mid-30s. They had, life responsibilities, and so we couldn't just postpone to the next year. We had to basically disperse at that point, which was really sad because we worked together really well. And so it never really happened. So that was really the only training trip that we did together. We also did some mountaineering in the Alps, climbed Mont Blanc and a few other things. But that was the only time that we'd done sort of a ski hauling journey as a group. So there was Adam, who ended up going into the Royal Navy. Lovely bloke. There's Rich, who lives up in Scotland, worked for an IT company for a long time, was also in the forces, same forces unit as Wilkie, the fourth member of the team. And I think I saw him last year. He also started running a company, like a tourism company up in Scotland. So that's Rich. And then Wilkie was in the forces. He went full time. And then after doing some seriously tough tours in the Middle East, he then became a teacher, a housemaster, ran an amazing Outward Bound charity for children who didn't really have access to the outdoors. And sadly, he was killed climbing just a few years ago. And that's why the couple of videos that I've had with Wilkie when we crossed Greenland together and that one. have mentioned at the end that he's not with us anymore. And yeah, it was beyond brutal to see someone who's so talented, a guy who brought people who were dying down off the slopes of Everest after he had summited, who had the strength and the strength of character to do that sort of thing. To see him so randomly plucked from the world of the living is, yeah, pretty horrible. Young family and so on. So yeah, a lovely team, Adam, Rich, and Wilkie. This one is more of a general, probably slight frustration and impatience. Bernard lamination when ? Yeah, I know. The weather, the humidity in the tent in the yard is not acceptable for doing a lamination right now. Though I wanted to do it in late summer, we then got delayed until October. That was really the last time the temperatures were even moderately acceptable. I'm doing the move over to the workshop at the moment. I've prepared the current mold to be over molded with that carbon fiber. If you don't know what I mean, go and check out the episodes on the Bernard mold, which is the Arctic vehicle that we're working towards. And I will get that laminated the moment the temperatures are appropriate and I can get the humidity down. And then once that shell is done, it can then be moved into the warm workshop and then we can crack on with resin infusion. That's the most succinct version of that. I've not just sort of left it there and done nothing. I've been there at least one day a week, every week, getting stuff going. But it's been a bit frustrating for videos because I want to give you something substantial, not just little iterative improvements. And Bernard merch, yeah, a few of you are wondering about that. I mentioned in the previous Q&A, I'll try not to cover the same ground twice. I mentioned that I wanted to make sure that the project had really hit the ground running before I start essentially selling stuff. This is the first sort of play around that I've had. This is actually a sports top, which I'm going to run a half marathon in quite soon. Half marathon is pretty much my most competitive distance for running. You probably know I'm a pretty keen runner, and so I'm going to run it in this. This is sort of the idea that I had. We go. Wow, doing this in mirror image is really hard. There we go. That is the sort of idea that I had for t-shirts and maybe for going on the for baseball caps as well. I don't know, mugs, like tell me what sort of merch you might find intriguing. We will see. Right, the next one. Oh, hold on, there's one that's come through via Instagram. I'm trying to look at all sorts of different groups of people. Okay. There was a question that came in, this was a few days ago, actually from someone who I know because he and his colleagues have very kindly sent me a tent to test. What do you think about outdoor boutique companies? I always love the word boutique being used in strange manners. The guy who asked me this question is from a company. I've got to make sure that I pronounce it correctly because it's from a Greek word, which means I think to keep warm. It's Ankaeli Outdoors, Ankaeli Outdoors, I think it is. And they sent me a sort of like a hot tent, so it's not like an expedition tent which you could pack up light in a rucksack or anything like that, but it's almost like not quite a base camp tent, but something in between that can that's got reflective layers and can be set up as a hot tent with a stove inside. So yeah, I'm going to test that at some point. The question is, what do I think about boutique companies? Obviously, I'm keen. I try to develop things on quite a small scale, which I hope might have greater downstream implications. I do also love large companies. I've worked with Adidas and Gore-Tex in their special projects teams, and the stuff that they have access to, the equipment, the testing facilities are phenomenal. Sometimes you do need that weight of heft, but I do also really enjoy the fact that a load of smaller companies who don't have the sort of inertia, the corporate lack of creativity sometimes, to just go out and make stuff and see what the market says. And I love the fact that often the market, particularly in the outdoor equipment and clothing world, is brutally honest, and you know whether you're onto a winner almost immediately. So yeah, big fan. Some stuff, obviously will be not very good, and normally those companies won't last very long. But that's the same in any part of commerce or any industry, and you just hope that really really innovative companies and small teams will be able to create, even if it's just like one niche product, one that has a positive impact on their subcategory of one industry or not, maybe even grow to become absolutely enormous, because all of these enormous companies, they came from small beginnings originally. Very few of them are from sort of nepo baby backgrounds where someone was started off with a £10 million investment. Normally these things start, particularly in the outdoor industries, they start relatively modest. Let me just have a check down here. It's so strange seeing my face on this screen because it's delayed about 5 seconds. Anyhow, do I climb mountains? And how is the climbing and polar world linked? And they mentioning people like Nims Persia and David Templeman Adams. It seems to say that they seem to do both, basically. The climbing and the polar world, more the mountaineering in the polar world. There's a difference between climbing and mountaineering, which is generally, I normally think of climbing as more rock climbing. Obviously, there's ice climbing as well, and mountaineering is more of a sort of a multi-stage, multi-day, multi-week sort of process, normally in higher parts of the world. Possibly less technical, but that's probably not true in a lot of cases. But I see rock climbing as somewhat distinct from mountaineering. And then you get a lot of people who are interested in both that and also traveling in the cold parts of the world. There's a huge amount of skills sharing. There's an awful lot of particularly winter camping, of course, being one, rope work skills, looking after your body and multi-day, multi-week degradation to make sure that your body doesn't essentially collapse on you. It's rather different to many other sports where sometimes you'll only be doing it for half an hour, 2 hours maybe, whereas mountaineering and polar travel have resilience and endurance baked in, of course. Mountaineering and climbing is, I would argue, most of the time slightly higher adrenaline. There's probably more of a need in polar travel to be able to deal with quite drudgy long days sometimes. I mean, there are seriously exciting moments, but there are also days when you just have to keep on grinding it out, looking after each other and keeping the team together. I think if you look at why some people are very much just climbers and some people are very much just polar, you probably have to look a little bit to past, to history, about how they all came around originally. And there's also a bit of a cultural divide driven by, I think, often the financial means that people had when they first got into it. And that's where I think also climbing and mountaineering tend to diverge. Historically, the polar world, I'm talking now about the expedition leaders, the captains of the early explorer ships and so on. They were generally from the military class, from the ruling class, not quite, maybe sort of whatever's just below the ruling class, I suppose. Upper middle class is normally naval officers, that sort of ilk. And sure, a lot of their crews and their teammates would have been very much from very humble backgrounds, and some of them from coming up from true poverty. But in terms of the way that they had to fundraise, normally you needed a ship or two ships or an airship or dirigible, all these kind of very early aeroplanes. You had to be able to fundraise serious amounts of cash. And for that reason, I think that generally that set polar travel apart from entire categories of society which just probably couldn't get access. Then mountaineering was not that dissimilar, particularly in the early days when it was very much a big expedition, long, multi-week, multi-month sieges of mountains. You know, the early Himalayan mountaineering expeditions went on for absolutely forever. And again, often they were led by people who were university educated, often from these on a few occasions, I won't name names, but a few of the early mountaineers were probably the slightly bored sons and sometimes daughters of the very rich who weren't going to be the heir to the estate, and so just had to go and often do something else mildly interesting. So they might have gone to an elite university and then thought, oh, I'll go and climb a mountain somewhere. I mean, there was definitely an element of that. Climbing is a bit different in the sense that I would say, let's talk about when the equipment started developing in the 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm not a professional climber. Climbers very much, chime in if you want to. But I think they tended to come from a much more humble background, because all you needed to do was turn up at a wall of rock with some chalk, some, some passable shoes on and some rope of some sort, you can the barrier to entry is a great deal lower. Doesn't mean that the quality of the top climbers is any lower than. In fact, in terms of technical skill, it probably exceeds both mountaineering and polar travel. But I think that culturally there was at that point a bit of a divide, and the way that that's morphed into the modern day, I think that quite a lot of the time the polar world is seen as the preserve of the rich. There are, and I've proven this, ways of doing it on much less than multi-million-pound budgets, but that has tended to become it's kind of allied itself, I would say, with the not the conservative, because conservative attitudes are something quite different altogether. Yeah, I would say probably from the more comfortable middle classes who have time to dedicate their brain's bandwidth to thinking, oh, I wonder if this can be done in the Antarctic or in the Arctic. I think there's an awful lot of that to it. I think the climbing culture, particularly in the 60s and 70s, really ran alongside, particularly in the US and Yosemite and so on, ran alongside alongside hippie culture and often hard left-wing culture. And that there's definitely still a strong vestige of that today, even though a lot of the big mountaineering companies are actually now big corporate giants. People often forget about that conveniently. And a lot of the climbing walls here in London are very much corporate entities designed to make profit. But I still think there is a strong vestige of left-wing culture in the climbing community. And I think that's probably why there's going to be a lot of overlap between the mountaineering, climbing, and polar world, but they're not the same thing. And sometimes there's a little bit of friction between the two. I've definitely noticed a little bit of that. Okay, there was a question. That's actually it's actually the next question on this list. It was about arguably my other channel, which is at the moment mostly monologues. So it's entirely monologues, and I would like to get some dialogues and sort of group discussions on there as soon as I can. The episodes take time to put together, and I've been trying to shorten them to try and increase the frequency. And I've got a load in the pipeline right now, but yeah, I'm trying to get more arguablys up. But James, you say arguably seems like a fizzer. Your last comment there was I don't know, aiming to start an argument, but then there wasn't even a downvote. You mean that everyone just on there agrees with me? I don't know. Some people have been pretty cross with me on there. Someone called me a fascist, and then I think sort of unsubscribed or something, which was very strange. But maybe clarify what you mean there, whether that's a question or a statement. Then there's another. Oh, yes. I need to be able to differentiate on here between statements and questions. Someone talking about their cousin who worked for British Antarctic Survey. It is funny how British Antarctic Survey, they run a number of bases down in the Antarctic around the edge. They don't have any in the interior of the Antarctic, and rather like the American stations around at McMurdo and even at the South Pole Station itself, they really don't like people doing sport expeditions, I guess you would call them. Sort of people would used to call them exploratory expeditions, but let's call them sports expeditions. People trying to ski a very long way or whatever it is. And back in the day, running dog teams and so on before dogs were banned in the Antarctic. And yeah, there's always been a little bit of snob value in the Arctic world, and it's probably not unconnected to what I was just talking about regarding the groups and the classes and the fundraising and so on. And there's definitely, in different parts of the Arctic and Antarctic, it varies. There's sort of the scientific class, there's the explorer class, there's the tourist class, and everyone decides that they are normally top of the tree. It's very funny. But British Antarctic Survey provide no assistance whatsoever for people like me. And I suspect if I was to turn up and knock on their door in the middle of an expedition, I would be not let in. Maybe I'm wrong. And maybe some of the other countries running stations there would behave differently. It's sad because there were much more naive, innocent days, back in the 70s and 80s and probably into the 90s when what I would call modern classic polar expeditions were far rarer, before what I would call the Playboy era of the 2000s, when you would absolutely get invited in and everyone would be super lovely because it would be a novelty. It would be something really exciting. But I think people are somewhat jaded to that sort of thing these days, which is rather sad. Oh, okay. James, you were clarifying about your comment on arguably. Maybe your comment was just beyond reproach. Maybe it was entirely correct, and there wasn't a single downvote. Yeah, the views on there. One of the videos got 80 something thousand views, which for a small channel, obviously, arguably, is much smaller than the channel you're looking at right now. Some of the episodes have struggled to get into the thousands, but generally, I find you just need to get quantity on there. Once I've got 30, 40 videos, generally then the algorithm will start to like you more and the whole thing will pick up. So I'm not worried about that. I've had videos on this channel which I thought completely flatlined and then months later hit 6 figures. And there are some in the background which you won't notice because they're not in the recent video list, which are doing crazy numbers. I've got videos doing tens of thousands a week, which is outperforming my new videos. So you never quite know what's going to happen on this crazy thing that is YouTube. Right, I'll crack on over here. What do I think about the Greenland situation? I obviously referencing all the Trumpian language, all the discussions, all the threats, it's all rather bizarre, isn't it? A part of the world that I thought was very niche, and a place that I spent an awful lot of my time, both on the Greenlandic ice sheet and also in villages, particularly when I lived up in the far north. Bizarrely, in the region right next to where JD Vance went up on that bizarre photo op thing that he was doing. It was at the Thule Air Base, which was actually where the community I was living in at the time, it's where they were forcibly moved from in the 1950s in order to create the airbase. They used to live in a village called Umanak, and they were moved from where the airbase is now at Pitufik, which is right next to Umanak, kind of the same place. But they were moved up to Kanak, which is an area of less good hunting. So at the time, everyone was pretty cross in the fact that they were not given much time to prepare and pack up and everything. It was all very odd. But that was very much early Cold War mentality, needs must. And that was when the US had all sorts of air bases all over Greenland. Yeah, what do I think about it? I've already done a full episode on arguably about what I think should happen in Greenland politically in the next 2-3 decades, probably. I think that at the moment, independence is a pragmatically shockingly bad idea, and I obviously get shouted down as being all colonially minded by saying things like that. It's purely because Greenland is not educationally, technically, or politically ready for independence. It's nuts. You have politicians there who do not know what they were doing, who spout this, that, and the other, but they have no idea how to run such a vulnerable country with such a small population. They don't know what they don't know. That's the problem. So I think that the idea is, at the moment, nations, allies, people who have their interests, and in particular the interests of their culture in mind, should be acting to protect them from countries that would absolutely asset strip them. And I think we know which countries we're talking about. In terms of Trump, this, that, and the other, I'm pragmatic about Trump. I think that some of his policies have been excellent. I think some of his messaging is simply impossible to comprehend. He clearly has a phenomenal instinct for political messaging, which I don't think anyone really has a handle on. I don't know what he wants to do next. I suspect that he knows that the threat about actually taking over Greenland was never going to happen. I suspect it was a distraction. And I think that they know full well that they are legally allowed to open and maintain more air bases, more military bases than they currently have open at the moment. They only have the one active base right now. So I suspect that situation will simmer down. I may be wrong. I suspect that's the case. Will we be seeing any more of your own recipe meals, and have you spoken to any nutritionists or Arctic-based military personnel about them to increase the variety of your diet? I'll answer the last bit. Yes, I have spoken to particularly some of the Royal Marines units in the UK about their equipment, but also their nutrition. I was supposed to be doing a course with them as a civilian instructor in Norway, but then we were told that there was a moratorium on any external funding for any trainers like me, which was kind of sad because I thought it'd be rather nice for me to go back and actually one of the people who I went through training with is the second in command of that unit now. So that would actually be quite nice. So yes, in contact with people who do this sort of thing in other professional ways. I may do one more own recipe meal. The videos didn't do crazily well. The flapjack one was doing okay. I'm not sure I'm going to carry on that mini series for the long term. I am going to do a chowder. I absolutely adore seafood and fish chowder, and it's a brilliant way of hydrating, getting lots of oil and fat in, and making something absolutely delicious. So yes, I will probably do one final recipe dedicated to a chowder. The beauty of a chowder is that when you're rehydrating dehydrated meals, if you over water it, if it's something like a curry, it'll end up like a watery curry, and no one wants that. The beauty of a chowder is because it's kind of a soup already, you just end up with a slightly looser chowder than you would otherwise. So it doesn't really matter. And if you really know that you need to hydrate, you can just add in more water, and the potato flakes and so on in there will mostly mop it up, and you can just choose the consistency that you want. So yeah, I might do one of those. We've got some political ones coming in. We've got Taco. Was that Trump always chickens out? Yeah, it certainly seems to have done so in Iran, when I think maybe, I mean, I was actually literally running past the US embassy in Battersea, and it's Nine Elms, which is next to Battersea in London over here. It's quite close to where I live, and there was an Iranian protest outside, and they were all shouting basically, Trump do something, Trump do something. So this is one situation where interventionism probably is needed, and it does appear that he might be possibly tacoing. Yeah, I would be. It's so complex, isn't it? But given the amount of bloodshed that happened on the streets over the last month or so, I honestly thought, and I think I would have been supportive of the Americans. So many of you will be Americans in the comments, doing something about that. Anyway, some of Trump's policies are excellent. Are you for real? Yeah, I am. I will probably do. In fact, I have a video for arguably in the pipeline, which is essentially a manifesto. It's not going to be an American manifesto because I'm not American, but it's a British manifesto because we have some elections coming up in this country, and we have a bit of turmoil fairly definitely happening in our leadership over the next few months. And if you are interested about what I actually think about different policies in literally each category, you're welcome to watch that when it comes out. I'm probably not going to jump into a political thing now, but the idea of every single one of Trump's policies being absolutely disgusting and awful, I don't think anyone who's really paying attention would have that as an opinion. That's not an endorsement of Donald Trump as a human being. I think the thing I find most offensive about Donald Trump is his lack of interest in knowledge. And I'm just like, I don't want to talk about whether he tells the truth or not. He isn't driven by wanting to know stuff about the world, and that's what I think is disappointing, dangerous, and why I would never call myself a Trump fan, even though I think that Kamala Harris winning the last election would have been an absolute catastrophe for the US. The last election was a hell of a difficult one. I'm quite glad I didn't have to vote in that one. Okay. So there's one about taste testing about survival meals. There are questions there. They are statements. I'm trying to differentiate the statements from the questions. Okay. We're staying in the Arctic at the moment, or we'll come back to sort of making stuff in a second, I think. Have I been to either pole? I have not. And I have got flack for that. When I started my career, I got flack for it. Normally by people who have never met me, don't know much about me, and just sort of look at things at face value. No, I've had two opportunities to go to the North Pole and one opportunity to go to the South Pole as a paid guide. And I said no. One of them was kind of up in the air, but the other two were pretty definite offers. And I turned them down because I didn't want to stand on either of those symbolic, to me, hallowed locations without having done so at the end of a long, novel, brutally difficult journey. And those three journeys would have been, I don't want to say adventure holidays because it's just a bit offensive to those people who have done, they're called last degree expeditions, where you ski the final 60 miles or so to either pole. but I simply don't want to stand on those locations having done so. Guiding isn't particularly well paid, so it's not like if someone offered me £1 million to go and do it, everyone's got a price. But it's incredibly important for me to when I achieve those two end goals, to do so in the style in which I think is appropriate, and that reflects the hard work that I put into my career. You've got to remember that the North and the South Pole, in an era when we now know what's there, remember the early polar explorers didn't exactly know what was there. They are just symbolic now. It is, if you're going to ski to somewhere in the high Arctic or somewhere in the Antarctic, you've got to finish somewhere. And the ice to the left and the right is absolutely the same. There's no visual difference, apart from the fact that you Americans have built a pretty ugly station at the South Pole. I don't know why that couldn't have been set up 5 miles to the north in one direction or the other. I don't know why they decided to put it right there. And it now means that polar skiers have to sort of ski in a weird loop to approach the South Pole in case they get into some clean air zone or something like that. I don't know why that couldn't have been built somewhere just off to the side. Rant over. I love you, Americans. I genuinely do. So yeah, I've not yet. I've had the opportunities. It's always an interesting one. I got a bit of flack always from an anonymous commenter in the comment section of a website called explorersweb.com, which used to be quite heavily trafficked. It kind of resembles it got bought out a few years ago. It now sort of resembles like a 90s blog, and it's a bizarre website. And someone in the comment section sort of said, "Oh, they've had Christmas dinner further north than I've been," or something, some kind of snide remark like that. And it was an odd one, because I thought about someone like Fridtjof Nansen, Norwegian. If you're into the Arctic at all, you'll know all about Fridtjof Nansen. Probably the most talented and most resourceful polar explorer in history. There's some stiff competition, but he was just out of this world in terms of his breadth of skill. He never stood at either North or South Pole, but I would still argue that he's the greatest that's ever lived. So that's not trying to draw parallels with myself, but just I think sometimes we have to put down the symbolic goals every now and again and talk about what might be learned from and achieved by doing a long journey in the Arctic and the Antarctic. That's what I'm trying to focus on instead. If I had the opportunity to stand at one or both or either in the right style, absolutely. I don't have a problem with the North or the South Pole, but in terms of it being your singular goal, not so much. Right, let's have a look over here. If you're a seafood fan, using Norwegian stock fish as part of your supplies, yeah, I will. If I'm doing like a fish chowder thing, I'll look at all the different sources of that. It needs to be freeze dried, of course, so that it can be rehydrated with hot water. So it will depend on what sort of trip. So someone from Seattle, hello. Is it listening in the rain? It's not raining outside. We have had the wettest, I think the wettest January in the UK for decades. It's been absolutely nuts, and it's actually made work at the boatyard almost impossible. It's been really frustrating. But I do know, yes, the Pacific coast from Seattle northwards, I think it's officially designated as a rainforest. So I think the part of Alaska that comes along down towards sort of Prince Rupert and so on, down towards the BC area, that's designated like a temperate rainforest, isn't it? Crazy amounts of rain. Yeah, you may be able to educate me on that. Do you like the cold more than the heat? Yes, I really struggle in the heat. I don't know why. I'm not born in a hot country or a cold country. I was born in a very moderate, temperate country. I'm not comfortable in anything more than 20, 25 degrees centigrade. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. It's sort of, like a standard warmish summer's day. I find it really uncomfortable warmer than that. And for some reason, I just find it more comfortable. I feel fresher and more healthy when it's colder. I don't know why. I mean, there are limits. Camping below minus 40 degrees, you don't feel healthy at all. I can promise you that. Right, I'll go for one of these. How far are we in? We're 40 minutes in. I don't know whether this will break a record for the longest Q&A that I've done so far. Do I always use VBLs? Right. This has been one of my most popular videos over the last 2 years about VBLs, vapor barrier liners. essentially plastic bags that you wear over bits of you or even over your entire body that stops your moisture, your perspiration getting into insulation. That's what a VBL is. It's not about a rain cover or anything like that. It's about stopping your moisture getting into your hitherto dry clothing. And although I try to cover a lot of detail in the videos, I've done one on sleeping systems and one on socks and gloves and so on. I probably didn't. I think I did cover it, but maybe I need to mention these things that are important again and again. It's not a campaign for everyone to wear VBLs every time you go outside for a hike. It's very, very specifically for when you're trying to look after gear for the long term. And by the long term, I mean sort of 3-4 days plus, when kit, equipment, clothing degradation can start having an effect on your health. If I'm going on a day hike, I will not wear VBLs. I'm about to literally in a few days fly to Mongolia. I'm so excited about heading to Mongolia in the midwinter. Really, really cool. They've had a really cold one, by the way, -30s and -40s for most of it. But I'm really looking forward to going there. If I'm going on a day hike from a truck, or if I'm filming something or whatever, I will not wear VBLs. I'm not taking VBLs with me to Mongolia. It's very specifically for multi-day, multi-week, multi-month expedition use, when the little percentage losses of insulation in your gear will be affected by the amount of moisture that builds up in your clothing. So don't worry, you don't always have to wear VBLs, but they are uncomfortable. They make you feel damp. You have to maintain your skin. You have to probably moisturize more than you would otherwise. You need to vent. Maybe you're sleeping your base layer in the morning after getting out and getting ready for the day. There is extra admin that needs to go on if you're wearing a VBL. So please don't think that I am advocating for VBL use the whole time. We've got information about we're talking about the temperate rainforest. I will read that later, and I'll probably go into like a Wikipedia vortex about that. Thank you for educating me. And we will go on with the questions. Why don't I use click bindings and alphas? Right, I'll try and this is from someone who's probably Scandinavian, because I'll explain why. And there's like code in there. I'll try and explain what those mean. So click bindings, there are various types of ski bindings for backcountry or cross-country skis. These are the sorts of skis where your heel is released, and so you can glide as you ski along, as opposed to downhill skis where your heels are locked in. There are, of course, touring bindings where you can do both, but let's keep it simple. So there are let's call them rigid bindings, which you click into with your boots, and normally those boot soles have to be rigid in order to click in properly. That's what generally most technical track skiers, Nordic skiers, skate skiers, and so on will use. And there's a Norwegian company who produce basically alpha boots. There's a whole range of different types of alpha boots, which are either from racing to long backcountry journeys and so on. And the Scandinavians, and in particular the Norwegians, are, I don't want to say obsessed by them. Yes, they are absolutely obsessed by them. There is no concept in the Scandinavian mind that you would want to wear any other sort of footwear or ski binding. And I get it. Scandinavians know how to ski. They really do. Their technique is normally on another planet. I, however, take a slightly more trans-Arctic global view about footwear and about expedition footwear. And just for clarity, we're not talking about track racing. We're talking about long, slow. Let's face it, sometimes this cross-country skiing is more like sort of shuffling or walking than it is actually cross-country skiing if you're holding a heavy sledge. I prioritize foot care more, and that's why I use what you would call like mukluk style soft boots, and then flexible bindings that you have to wear with flexible soled boots. And it's because it really looks after my feet. I have never once had a blister on any trip of any length, where I'm afraid I've seen the heels and the toes of my friends who have actually been wearing the Alpha Madres and so on, are torn to shreds, all the skin gone. And yes, if you wear them improperly, you wear the right sock level, all that sort of stuff, I understand you can do a trip without ripping your feet to shreds, but there's always a chance that they won't work out for you. Often they're leather, and leather can cause all sorts of problems, particularly if they get damp and then they don't dry out. So look, Scandies, I get it, and I know I'm never going to change your mind on this, but yes, I use soft boots and flexible bindings in the Arctic. Let's see if there are any questions here. Once you get your sleeping bag completed, are you going to test it yourself or have it laboratory tested? if I have access to a lab, I'm an honorary doctor of the University of Portsmouth. Bizarre, I know, and they actually have a cold testing chamber. I can't just walk in every time I fancy, though. Their head of department there's very busy, and I know wouldn't appreciate me just sort of rocking up the whole time to try and jump in there. So maybe if I can get some lab time, possibly. And the other labs we were using with Adidas were in Slovenia, in Ljubljana. So that's quite difficult to get to. You know what? It's probably easier for me just to go somewhere cold and go and sleep. I can still put sensors and moisture sensors all over myself to do a more quantitative assessment of the way that it works. I've also got a thermal camera now. I used to have one which I didn't really like very much. It was always really glitchy, but I bought another one from a different brand now, so I'll be able to do more thermal imaging clips of stuff in the coming months. So that would be good. So yeah, I'll probably just test that one in the field, to be honest with you. Generally, if I get a good night's sleep at minus 35 degrees, I know it's working. And then we can try and iteratively improve areas that are not perfect from there, I would say. If I don't survive the night, then you guys can, someone can take over my channel and you can tell everyone that I'm terrible at designing sleeping bags. Are you really grumpy, or is it for the camera? That sounds like a trap. I don't know if I can answer that without sort of trying to explain away my behavior. I've never felt grumpy. It's a funny thing. There will be something about the fact that I do tend to communicate in a relatively non-high energy, sort of American TV presenter kind of style. I think you call it low key or whatever you want to call it. Low energy. I'm not low energy. I'm constantly doing stuff, but you know what I mean. So it might be something to do with my style of delivery. The fact that I will definitely take on really irrational, nasty people in the comments, I won't just ignore them, and I genuinely find that amusing. I find it quite sporting. So I never feel grumpy. Do I take on people who I think are dishonest? Yeah. If a company tries to screw me over, will I take them on? Oh yes, I will, and I have done, and sometimes very nearly to the courts. Is that grumpiness? I don't know. A grumpy person isn't enjoying life. God, I enjoy mine. Even when things are going badly, even when I lost that huge sponsorship deal during COVID, I don't think I grumped after that. I was just, I just got on with things. I don't feel grumpy. But I appreciate that's a question that I don't think I can answer in any particularly, in a way that would shut down those who would answer in the affirmative. Right. Someone says that I seem perfectly normal. That's incredibly insulting. You can unsubscribe. Right, Mongolia. If you're going, can you visit Kalkindol? I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong. I have a little phrase book, and wow, Mongolian is hard. And that's from someone who has had to speak a small remote Greenlandic sub-dialect. It's really tricky. So I've definitely pronounced that wrong. Be on the lookout for World War tanks in the desert. We are going to go to the Gobi, and we're hiring a big truck, and we're going to go to the Altai. We're going to go north a bit, but not too far north, because the Grand Tour did lots of that. And we're going to do some Gobi. The Gobi will be hopefully covered in a bit of snow. I'm hoping it'll be spectacular. They've got some old Soviet tanks there, apparently. Yeah, I will look out for wrecked sort of World War II or Cold War era stuff lying around. We're definitely going to be trying to cover as much ground as we possibly can. Right, I've got a question from Caleb. This was from the comment on the posts. By the way, those of you who are watching this, there is it used to be called the community section. It's now called posts. If you go to the right-hand one of the tabs, if you go to my channel's main homepage, you'll see it. Often you have to sort of scroll a bit to the right to see it. Posts. That's where I do sort of text and photo updates of what's going on, links to look at stuff. And I feel sometimes people just don't know it's there. And it was on one of these comments to one of my posts on there that this question came in. First of all, there's a bit of a plaudit for me. I love the vapor barrier strategy you introduced me to, and I use it all the time. Good. The fact you're still alive to type that means that I'm a winner in terms of my VPL strategy. My only problem is that my latex gloves keep slipping off my wool gloves. As a result, the tip of the latex gloves keep getting caught in my jacket zip. Any solutions? Right. This may not be related to it, but first of all, do not use latex gloves because they are much less strong than nitrile gloves. Use nitrile gloves and the thickest, highest quality ones you can get hold of, and then get them very slightly oversized, but not too oversized, not like triple XL size, because that's probably going to then contribute to them slipping off. So slightly oversize them. It may well be that nitrile just grips better because I've never had that problem. I think latex might be slightly slidier. Don't know. They might be slightly too big for you. That's a possibility, and therefore they're just as you move and as you sort of swing your arms around, they're just slowly riding forwards. And I can imagine it's frustrating if you keep on having the fingertips sort of rise about an inch sort of beyond your fingertip. I'm trying to think of another reason why that might be the case. Shop around. Maybe like the ones I've got, they come quite a long way up your wrist. I mean, not sort of up your arm, but sort of a good inch or two up onto your over your wrist, and maybe that allows for a little bit more of a grip. Don't go too tight because that will affect blood flow. But yeah, just experiment with the ones that you're using. I use these cobalt blue ones. I'll try and find the brand. I forgot which brand they are, but I've always found them fantastic. Right, let's see if there's any questions here. Oh, we've got some Mongolian history going on there. I'm going to have to scan through all these messages at the end to go on a Wikipedia vortex. Right. Can we have the Alan cancellation full story? Right. So those of you who don't know what Alan is, it's like the bulk of the views of this channel, but the project's now ended. Alan is still a bright orange offshore lifeboat that I basically did a huge amount of work on and then took up from London up to Shetland, which is a small island group off the north of the UK. The intention was to take Alan much, much further north up into the high Arctic via Norway and then potentially east. And I did a whole video, it must have been half an hour long, explaining the reason why I was going to stop that. And it caused quite some trauma on the channel. I lost, subscribers, and a few people were very cross with me and so on. I didn't explain it right at the time when things were very raw about my reasoning. And I guess I'm not going to retread that. I'm going to just distill it into probably 3 main reasons, and there were probably nearer 10 reasons, but 3 main reasons. I was not at the point where I had an auxiliary power system that I could trust to propel us safely if the main engine failed. There was only one main engine for the boat, and that meant that crossing to Norway at that moment was not safe, and we had an engine problem coming up towards Shetland. So that in time would have been solvable. So that's not a game ender. The second one was, why did I not cross across to Norway at that point? Once you enter Norwegian waters, the clock starts in terms of tax, import duties, all that sort of stuff. Once you've crossed, you've crossed. It's a big deal. And if you then basically have to temporarily stop, and all that stop becomes more semi-permanent, you end up with large financial issues going on. And I didn't want to end up making that commitment when I knew that the third reason was most likely to be a long-term showstopper. Now, look at this in relation to the dates that this all happened. I bought, with my teammates and the company that I used to run for Dark Ice, that's the project we were running in the Arctic, we bought Alan in 2019. After COVID stopped the Dark Ice project, I bought Alan off my own company, and then I started the channel. At that point in 2020, I thought there was a possibility of not using the original plan, which was to sea freight him at sponsor's cost all the way across to Canada, and then have him road freighted all the way to Tuyaktuk in the far north of Canada on the edge of the Arctic Ocean. Instead of doing that, which I couldn't afford anymore on the budget that we were suddenly looking at, I thought, what about if we access the Arctic instead via Scandinavia, via basically the Norwegian coast? I even looked at trucking all the way up, but I thought actually taking him up the coast on the water would be more interesting. And then the intention would be to launch an expedition having gone along the Russian coast towards where the transpolar drift then pushes back towards the Atlantic again. That was the concept that I was looking ahead at long term. Now, in 2022, the tense situation that the West, and in particular the British passport holder, has with the Russians, which was workable at that point, obviously then became a complete non-starter. There was a British explorer, I guess you call him explorer, in Siberia, who got arrested and put in solitary confinement in a jail in Siberia for I think for some weeks. So you know full well that if you turn up in a small boat, probably armed, in the Russian waters north of where all their military installations are, the chance of you being left to carry on with your trip are about zero. And I don't know whether the Russians, if there was a medical emergency, I don't know whether the Russians right now would honor their obligations under the international treaties for search and rescue. They look after a huge tranche of the Arctic Ocean in terms of search and rescue. Would they use their resources to rescue a badly injured or very, very gravely ill Western explorer? Don't know. That's the main reason why I decided not to cross to Norway. And it still hurts. You know how much work I put into that boat. Anyhow, that's by the by. I know we're still talking about General Zhukov. Perfect. We're doing a full-on World War II tank battle in the comments. I love that. Right. Oh no, I've already answered that one about Greenland and Trump, and nearly got myself shouted at in the comments. Do I have family? I have, as in, I have blood family. Absolutely, yes. Got brother, father. We lost my mum last year, and yeah, the most incredibly supportive trio they were, and obviously grandparents and so on, who sadly aren't with us anymore either. And I have a nephew, but I'm guessing this question is more about, am I married with kids? No. Not through sort of, it's not like a long-term decision that I made or anything like that. I think the idea of sharing life with someone is actually rather fun. But I don't just jump into things without getting it right. So no, I'm currently still in a zone where I'm kind of, we'll see what happens about that. Very open-minded. What would you do if you couldn't do what you do? So if it couldn't be something active, and bear in mind that I was originally going down the military route, and then I've gone down like the outdoors civilian route. Let's say I was injured to the point at which I couldn't be highly active, be an athlete, be outdoors, and so on. I would probably be a commercial litigator. And the person who's calling me grumpy, argumentative, is probably cackling at their screen right now. Yeah, I do like the idea of the battle of ideas, and also I think as long as I was able to choose my clients, and that's the difficult thing. Often you have to take what you're given. I like the idea of taking really nasty, cynical, arrogant people to task and making them pay. And I think I'd be pretty good at it. In fact, I've had to do, I won't go into details, but I've had to do a couple of sort of litigations regarding my companies and to protect my teams and my projects from really horrible people, actually. And we've always been successful because we've always had both the argument on our side, the moral argument on our side, and we were damn good at defending ourselves. And on one occasion, being the litigant. So yeah, I'll probably be a litigator. I like the idea of brains trying to solve a very complex conundrum by trying to see who has the better bandwidth. Yeah, I think that's what I'd be. Right, any more? Thank you to Scott in the comments. I didn't want to sort of do that. I don't sort of mention things like that in my videos generally, because it's just, I don't know why, actually. It's just I think sometimes people want to just hear what's going on with my channel, and I try not to have too many breaks in my episodes. What food do I miss the most when on an expedition? I can tell you absolutely anything green. You would think it's juicy steak or a pizza or something just really, really stodgy and fatty and lovely. Anything green, because you're obviously not eating green food. Everything's beige when you're on expeditions. Flapjack, freeze-dried curries, everything like that. Even cheese. So the idea of a lovely fresh salad, it doesn't have to be a healthy salad. It could be an incredibly unhealthy one covered in with maple syrup and all sorts of excitement on, and lots of nuts, full-size walnuts and all that sort of thing. But yeah, green salad, unhealthy one. just to sort of to get that crunch, which you don't get from any of your food when you're on a long trip. Right. We're looking. We're on exactly an hour, which probably puts us at the second longest one of these that we've done before. Right. I'll keep an eye down here on if there are any more questions there. I don't have any more questions on my list, but I had two things that I wanted to mention as we go through. I don't know if I can do this. Am I able to post on my own thing? I think I am. Hold on. I don't think this will crash the whole thing. I'm about to just put a link. There we go. I've just put a link into the chat. This is a link to a YouTube video that I watched it ages ago. I think most people who are interested in mechanics, aeroplanes, historic aeroplanes, and the Arctic will know all about this. But there was a B-29 Super Fortress that crashed up in northern Greenland, actually north of where I lived in Greenland, really far north, way north of the Thule Air Base, back in late 40s or early 50s. And basically someone in the 90s, a rich ex-test pilot, wanted to go and try and basically get it running again. And I think some of you will know about that story. If you do, don't sort of spoil how it ends. But anyway, I thought that would be quite cool just to share a video which you might find interesting if you're into engineering, if you're into aircraft, if you're into the Arctic. It's all there in one video, and it's quite a powerful film. Actually, I think it was filmed by PBS back in the 90s. Anyway, it's all on there for free. The final thing I was going to do is ask you a question. I very, very nearly finished editing an episode of updates from the from the workshop and from the boatyard. I'm going to the boatyard tomorrow to do some final stuff there before I go to Mongolia. I've more or less edited together the bulk of it already, and I was going to add a few more clips from tomorrow. I'm now going to be away for a few weeks. And so I'm afraid I don't have a whole load of videos waiting to be posted out every few days or every week. I just don't have the capacity or the content at the moment to do that. I'm naturally quite impatient, and my argument would be the second I've got that up, I'm just going to post it straight away. Would you rather I do that? Bear in mind that this is obviously a video that's going to be posted today as well, or should I schedule it to go out in a week and a half or something? Just post it or wait for it. You can let me know what you think. We have a question there. How do I tolerate religious people? That's an interesting question. I don't think I'm in a position where I either need or don't need to tolerate them, because most of them are not screaming about their particular beliefs in my face. But obviously, there are moments in my life where I'm someone who is not of God, and I am anti-theist to the extent that I think that in the grand scheme of things, the vast majority of situations, the gods that we have created for ourselves tend to cause more harm than good. That is not to say that I don't think that some, for instance, religious architecture is not stunningly beautiful, and I mean heart-stoppingly beautiful, but I consider that to be the work of inspired men, and normally men and women. So I don't really attribute that. I've been lucky that not many people have tried to shove it down my throat in terms of their religious views. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that the amount of damage being caused by one other, I mean, in particular, one particular dominant form of religiosity at the moment doesn't need countering actively. But no, I'm definitely not the sort that would, for instance, ban a religious person from working with me. I think that would just be an obtuse thing, because in most cases, I consider actually some of the greatest victims of religions are actually those who are the adherents and operating under something of a Stockholm syndrome. I think a lot of the benefits of what people can take from their religions can be had, and I know this is a contentious point, which I maybe we'll discuss on arguably at some point, but can be had through a secular worldview and through secular alliances and groups and communities and so on. That's a good question. Someone is advising me that waiting to post is better for the YouTube algorithm. Yeah. Or I might just be impatient and post it. I don't know. We will see. I will decide once I've edited it, the rest of it together tomorrow, and see what we think. My views sound quite similar to Church of England. Yeah, I mean, it's like Anglicanism, and in particular the Church of England, it's such a soft version of Christianity, so soft. Their numbers are in free fall because it doesn't have any of the dog. It should have the dogmatic behaviour of, for instance, the Catholic Church and some of the other more, let's say, talkative and forceful Christian churches. It was started by, Henry VIII, who was a despot. So it's odd that it's ended up being such a lily-livered part of the Christian diaspora. Yes, I don't think. I would argue that probably only a fairly small proportion of the British or the Church of England clergy actually believe in God. Maybe that's a slightly hot take, but it's probably quite true. I think for them, often it's just the pastoral life that attracts them, and obviously they're able to marry and have kids and so on. There's more questions coming. Good. What's your unnecessary comfort item that you are willing to carry when you're traveling, as in weight that I really shouldn't justify? Occasionally, because you can't really take any fruit with you, and even if it's fake flavoring, it's better than nothing. I will sometimes have it every fortnight or so, or after a certain landmark to congratulate ourselves. Often I'll have like a very fruity packet of Haribo, which is really not good nutrition because a lot of it's just like gelatin and then sugar, and sugar is really, you get a sugar high and a sugar low and whatever. So it's not the best thing. But in the tent in the evening, just a few fruity Haribos is sometimes quite nice. What else? I was going to say that my fur sleeping hat, but I would say that has a technical need for it. I mean, it is just morale, and the same thing. I have a near 1 liter insulated mug that I have my huge hot chocolate in every single morning. But again, that's all about hydration and getting myself ready for the day. No, I am going to put that as unnecessary because the water I could drink anyway, the sugar in the chocolate, same story. The sugar is not great for you. You shouldn't really be having it. So no, that is my morale. My massive hot chocolate every single morning in the tent is my unnecessary morale. I could get those calories more lightweight and more cleverly administered. But no, I love my 2 sachets of Galaxy hot chocolate. Unbelievable. Right. On that note, I think we will finish. Unless there's another question. I'm not sure, Scott. I'm not sure I would call myself a humanist. I think some humanists can come out with some slightly odd stuff, and I find dogmatic groupings of anyone, even if they are secular, sometimes slightly. I'm not anti-humanist, but I wouldn't actually call myself a humanist. I'm afraid I tend to try and come at everything from first principles, which means I don't have a political party, and I'm relatively hard to label, which is why when I was told arguably by, was it Dan something, that I was definitely a fascist, then I was mildly amused. Right. I think that's it. Thank you all. God, this has gone slightly. I should have gone for the old red wine, because now this has gone. It's got slightly warmer than I would like. It's a Sant'Emilio. I absolutely love a lovely young, fresh Sant'Emilio. Don't clip that little clip and put it on shorts, otherwise you can probably make that sound terrible. God, I'll stop talking now. Right, goodbye, everyone. No, I don't say goodbye, do I? Bye.